If you can hear my air conditioner running, I apologize. It's gotten very warm in this room, so it is running. Guys, there is a specific feature that has sort of proliferated its way onto a whole bunch of modern smartphones, and it's a feature that as that was beginning to happen, I was actually really excited to get my hands on, to see on more and more devices. But as that has happened, I've discovered that I don't actually like it, and more often than not, I disable it. What feature am I talking about? I'm referring to the ability for these cameras specifically, when they detect that you're taking a photo of something up very close, they will switch to a macro lens. Now, there's not like a dedicated macro lens on any of these phones, but they do have a lens available that is able to focus at a very close focal range, and you get a really nice, crisp macro photo. You may be saying to yourself, Shane, you just said that it does a good job at this. Why are you disabling it? What are you doing instead? And that is the topic of today's video. I'm going to show you how I take macro photos with my OnePlus Open. So let's take a look at the OnePlus Open camera. And the first thing that I'm going to show you is this little icon here. And this guy pops up anytime you're trying to take a photo of something very, very close. You can see I'm able to get very, very close to this thing, and it will stay in focus. That's really cool, but we're actually going to disable it. Simply tap it, and that is going to shut it off. Now what we're gonna do, let me show you this first. The same distance, notice how blurry it is, right? That's what the macro mode actually does. If we turn this on in real time, switch that on, boom. Much, much more in focus. Look how close you can get actually. Let's turn it back off, and it switches lenses, and it is super duper blurry. What we're gonna be using instead of that is going to be this master mode. And no, fans of X-Men 97, I did not say master mold, master mode. We're looking for this option here that says MF. And if you click on that, you now have this nice little dial, and you can see how things are turning orange. That's called focus peaking. What that means is if it's colored in orange at that moment, it is in focus. So right now, you can see exactly, and actually if I bring this down kind of at an angle, you might be able to see how the orange is down here, and it sort of works its way up. That's actually pretty cool, right? So we can bring Snorlax back in, and what basically we're gonna do is we're gonna bring it all the way to the left so that we're focused as close as we can get. And you can see he's got some orange fringing now, which means he is in focus. But you're probably saying, but Shane, that's great, it's in focus, but it's really far away. And yes, of course it is. We're gonna tap in the middle, and we're just gonna zoom in 2x with the 2x just a digital zoom. This is a big enough, high enough resolution sensor that's really not going to make a ton of difference to the actual photo quality that you're getting. And in fact, it's going to look better than it will using the wide angle. But more than that is actually going to change. And let me actually show you what I mean with a couple of sample photos. So this is going to be photo sample number 1, and it was taken using the built-in macro mode. And I think that there is a decent amount to like here, but we're gonna kind of nitpick a little bit. I can actually see there's a gap between those two little micro bricks, but you can see little individual bits of dust that's on there. But other things you can see is maybe a little bit of noise, a little bit of grain in the background because the lighting isn't quite as good. In the darker, more shadowy areas, it's gonna struggle just a little bit. But notice the amount of bokeh that we have on these objects in the back. And this is where this is going to sort of be a point of preference. Maybe you don't like bokeh. Maybe you don't like the look of a camera with a large aperture. Maybe you want most of this stuff to be close in focus. If you do, use the built-in macro mode. If you're like me and you like that large aperture bokeh mode, look what you get using my method. This is an entirely different animal. Or it's the same Snorlax, but you know what I mean. If I zoom in, we're getting very much the same level of detail. It's very, very similar. We can see that gap there. We can see individual bits of dust and so forth. But look here in the back at the Charizard. Look how nice and soft that is. We don't have nearly as much noise in the darker areas because we're using our much larger primary sensor with that large aperture, large pixels. Which, just as a quick aside, look at the specifications on the OnePlus Open. This is the main camera. It is a 48 megapixel. It is 1.12 micrometer for the pixel measurements. If we look at the wide angle, it is also 48 megapixels, but it's 0.8 micrometer pixels. And I believe that's the one it switches to for your macro shots. It's just not quite as good of a sensor. It's definitely a smaller aperture. I am not a total camera expert, but you can see the difference that it makes for yourself. One other difference that it makes is with the focal length. You're getting a lot more stuff in the frame here versus here. This is just a different focal length, and maybe you're familiar with this, but on most cameras on your phone, I should say, when you switch to portrait mode, what does it do? It switches to your telephoto, or it digitally zooms in like 2x. And the reason for that is because people tend to find that a 2x zoom makes faces look more natural when you're zoomed out. Our primary lenses are actually wide angle lenses, and it kind of distorts things. In particular, it's going to distort things if you're, really focused on something up close. It's going to make it look weird. So you get a better, in my opinion, a better focal length. You get better color representation, I believe, in this instance. This is a little bit overwarmed. You get a softer, more bokeh background. You get less digital noise. This is the way I take macro photos. And let me show you just some macro photos I've taken with the OnePlus Open and this method. So most recently, I took this one. I've done a little bit of editing to it to kind of stylize it a little bit. I actually probably need to hit it again because I think it's a little bit more saturated than I want it to be. But if I zoom in, I mean, this is pretty cool, right? Like, that is really, really nice. And there's so much bokeh. I love how this is already out of focus. This is in focus, but by the end of that leaf, we're already falling off. I just love the way that that looks. It's almost like a tilt shift vibe. I dig it a lot. Here's a cool one of a rosebud that is beginning to bloom in the backyard. Again, same sorts of qualities. An individual clover here that is beginning to bloom. And again, we have the same kinds of qualities, right? So this leaf and this are in focus, but anything closer, anything further away, beginning to fall off, tilt shift look. I just like it. And here's one more of a daffodil that bloomed in the front yard, if I'm not mistaken. And this really represents it well. We're in focus on this side, but we're out of focus on this side. I love that shallow depth of field. It just gives it a totally different vibe, almost like this dreamlike feel. Let me give you a couple of more quick things to keep in mind while you're doing this. When you're in this master mode, you may see this icon over here. When you launch this for the first time, vignette is probably going to be turned on and sharpness is probably going to be increased a little bit, maybe to like 25 or something like that. You may want to adjust those back off and then go back to your controls here. Just depends on your preference, but do pay attention to these effects. One other thing you could consider is coming up here to your settings and look for preserve settings, and you can actually toggle auto macro. Keep the auto macro setting used last time. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that if you told it to have the auto macro mode turned off, it's going to leave it turned off. It's going to do whatever you had it on last. So guys, that's the method I use to take macro photos with my OnePlus Open. Again, you may prefer the built-in version. You may just like that better. It's simpler, it's quicker. That's absolutely fine. But if you're like me and you want that sort of nice focus fall off, this I think is a really, really cool way to go, guys. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.